Welcome to the very first episode of the Jack of all trades, Master of none, or Joatmon Podcast. Our goal is to sit down with wildly different people from different backgrounds operating in a wide variety of industries and talk to them about how they got to where they are and what might be next for them, as well as lessons that they may have learned along the way. This is episode number 1, and today we're lucky enough to be able to spend some time with one of the co-founders of one of the coolest and most innovative companies that I've ever had the privilege to be part of. Welcome Scott McNealy of Sun Microsystems.
Well, why don't we launch into it and rock and roll?
All right. So what I wanted to start with is, a little bit of where you came from, where you grew up, and then how you got into this, what became, the IT business for you. So why don't we start with where you came from?
All right. Well, there's kind of a long line here. I was actually just watching some video of my grandfather doing open heart surgery back in the 1950s when
wow.
he was in Cook County in Chicago. I literally watched a video of him taking a bullet out of, and it was kind of crude, the surgery compared to how they do it, but right out of a beating heart. He had 4 sons, and one of them was my dad. They all went to Harvard and Harvard grad school. My dad went to Columbus, Indiana to work for Cummins Engine, like a lot of Harvard Business School graduates did. He had 3 boys and eventually had a girl. I moved around with him to be in 8 schools by 8th grade, all throughout the Midwest: Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Kansas, Ohio, Michigan, all the rest of it.
Wow.
Eventually settled down in Michigan, became a Tigers fan and a Lions fan and a Red Wings fan. Then got into Harvard and Stanford. And my dad said, go to Harvard and make something of yourself. And my mom said, go to Stanford and be a playboy. And I ended up going to Harvard, worked there for I was going to be a doctor, but it was 60% doctors doing pre-med when I was a freshman. So I ran into what eventually became my chief of staff at Sun Microsystems. Was a PhD in economics, and I loved it. He taught my first ever Ec 10 class, and I loved it. Switched over to economics, and then graduated, went to work for FMC Corporation because I didn't have any other job. I was my old hockey coach, and I was a plant foreman, then a plant scheduler, and then a reliability engineer, and then a sales rep for Rockwell International Automotive Operations Plastics Division. Sounds a little like, what was the movie where they told him to go get into plastics? I can't even remember right now, but it was kind of what I did, and then got into business school. I tried 3 times to get into Stanford and finally got in. I tried 2 times at Harvard and didn't even try the 3rd time because I'd already done the Harvard thing and I wanted to go out west. Tom Watson was a hot golfer that had just come out of Stanford, and I thought, what the heck, let's go do the West Coast. And that's sort of how I got near the Silicon Valley. I was making tanks right after business school, and then I got a call from a computer company called Onyx, and they were the first company to put Unix on a microprocessor, and you couldn't build them. I did that for 10 months, and then Vinod Khosla, my classmate from business school, said, let's go make workstations. So I was single, young. We were all 27, 4 of us, and we started Sun, and the rest is history.
Fun history at that. I understand it wasn't. How far into that did you get before you started really? I mean, you started with the workstation business, and then it evolved into a large scale server business. So where was the transition there?
Well, so we did start off, it was the Stanford University Network, hence Sun Workstation. Andreas von Bechtelsheim, who had invented it at Stanford, couldn't make them. And so Vinod met him and said, I know somebody who knows how to make computers because I've been doing it for a whole 10 months at Onyx. And we all got together and we needed a software guy, and we recruited Bill Joy out of Berkeley, who had done Berkeley Unix. We put it together and it just took off, and we were selling workstations like crazy. And we had invented network file system. Bill Joy and the gang invented network file system, which is ubiquitous now. And we noticed that it became a really good file server if you just took the monitor off the top of the box, the pizza box, it was all of a sudden a server. And so we decided that, wow, there's a real business in doing servers. Now, at the same time, we totally whiffed on a whole industry, and that was we were running Route D on Sun OS on the pizza box. And China built out their first version of the internet using our servers, which were really routers and simple switches. But we didn't, I didn't know. I took over 2 years after we put the company together, and I'm not a technologist, so, you know.
Yeah, when we were working on the Sun Grid stuff, I mean, that's really the big Force 10 switches that we were using to do all the routing and switching in that infrastructure. That's really all it was a NetBSD machine with specialized network interfaces.
Exactly. Routing and switching is what happens with an operating system, and the real question is: do you store and forward without state, or do you have state? Do you let retry solve your failures, or do you have true redundancy and fault tolerance? And these are all just different levels of centralization versus decentralization, and synchronous versus asynchronous. And these are all words I didn't really understand when I started Sun, but became quite cozy with them as we developed. But we started off with workstations and did servers, and then along came Java, and all of a sudden we were into the internet, and that marrying the Java virtual machine with the Mark Andreessen Netscape browser, and we were off and running to the races in the network space. So those were kind of the three big phases. My big mistake was thinking we could be the arms supplier to all of the clouds, because we invented the network as the computer slogan a long time ago, but it turns out all the cloud vendors just decided to make their own because they got so big. The scale. I remember walking into my board one time and I said, our biggest competitors, IBM, DEC, HP, Apple, Microsoft, Intel. Go, nope, it's Google. They're right now buying 18% of all computers being bought in the world today or manufacturing. They still didn't believe me, but it became very clear in a few years.
And it got really funny in, later when I was working on the grid, and then what became the Sun Cloud was in the briefings, when my boss would come in and say, do you realize we're competing with a book company? We're not competing with Google. We're not competing with whatever. We're competing with the book company. And it was really hard for that to drill into your head, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's interesting to see. Google was just a search company until somebody figured out how to auction every word to the highest bidder every day. That's a great business model. I often thought Office was the most unbeatable post office box for royalty checks business model, but the Google paid search model turns out to be even better, and Amazon's figured out a pretty good game. Facebook figured out there's always a new game in town.
What really surprised me is what you were talking about just there, though, is that Google rather, real time, basically for all intents and purposes, an auction that happens continuously. And it's faster than you would imagine actual Wall Street real-time trading happening. It's absurd how it works. That's actually what I did for a few years after Sun was sold to Oracle. Is I worked for a company called Velasys that had a subsidiary called Brand.net under Jim, actually. Then that's all they did was they had a whole staff of PhD mathematicians that sat around all day figuring out the right algorithms to bid on the right keywords and the right, placement of advertisements.
Right. That's right. So, it's interesting. Who'd have guessed Uber? Some of these things are not that hard to do. It's just being there at the right time at the right place when the right amount of latency and security and cost and all the rest of it meets some new intersection of functionality, and people jump on it. It's been fun to watch. I mean, I've been watching this now since 1982.
And just some of these ideas that, I mean, obviously business guys like you, I'm in the trenches doing the hard labor. I never would have conceived of some of these ideas that people like you come up with and just throw at the wall to see if they stick. Like you said, like Uber. I never would have imagined just getting into a stranger's car from an app.
And I wish I'd invented Zoom just before the pandemic. You know, the pandemic
Right.
created a whole um, a new set. I mean, obviously, Amazon was very well positioned for it. Um, Facebook and Google were very well positioned for, you know, the most contentious election ever, because they made a lot of money on advertising and political ads and that sort of thing. Zoom was a big deal. Netflix. I mean, I admit it. I watched Tiger King, the whole thing. I'll never get those hours back, but I was scared. I thought we were all going to die. So, you know, what
Well,
the heck, might as well die having watched that trash. But it's
it
a
was trash, but it was also hilarious, right? I mean, come on.
well, I did watch it. I admit it.
Uh,
Don't judge me.
so you, after the whole, Sun transition, you, where did you go next? I mean, what was next for you?
Well, at one point, all of a sudden, I looked up. I was, you know, 50-ish, and I had a 2, 4, 6, and 8-year-old at home, all boys, with a wonderful wife who's looking at me like, "Oh my gosh, what do I do with all these boys?" I had a sister when I grew up, and I thought, you know what, I've Sun was doing well when I left. We were growing. We had 48% gross margins. We were generating cash. We had billions of dollars of cash in the bank, and we were actually gaining share. And I thought, you know, I've gone through many, many cycles. Do I want to keep doing this? I was actually starting to feel like I was a pretty good CEO at that time, but I said, you know what? I've been in the pinata. I'm heading into my third decade of being in the pinata. I want to spend time with my kids. My dad didn't get to spend a lot of time with me. He was in the auto industry, president of AMF, and ran an ad agency, and I didn't see him much. And I wanted to see my kids, and so I stepped back, became chairman, and we elevated a CEO, and that went on for about 5 years, where I did a lot of travel during the week and made sure I was home on the weekends to be with the boys and coach hockey and go play golf with them and all the rest of it. And then Oracle came in and bought Sun, and all of a sudden I was homeless, jobless, nowhere to go, you know, spare change. So I just started doing advisory work. And my number one passion was trying to fix education. And so I put a lot of energy in my own personal money and got friends of Scott to help out with Curriki, which originally was just collecting all of the great OER, open education resources out there into a large repository or library. And then more recently, we've moved over to we took a look at the repository 2 years ago and said, you know what, it's not really very innovative. It's not multimedia, interactive, web enabled. It's sort of just shaky videos, PDFs, and worksheets and stuff. Not what you would call a really exciting, bingeable, dopamine addictive remote learning experience. I mean, Game of Thrones or Fortnite or
Well,
Minecraft.
more importantly, what the kids basically have to have today just to keep them,
Well,
there.
we started off by saying, how are we going to make education, remote learning better and self-paced? I mean, I was really focused on self-paced because I think every kid learns every subject at a different rate than the other kid.
Agreed.
And so we looked at it and we said, how are we going to pull this all together? Well, PowerPoint created the standard for presentation. Adobe created the standard for PDF. And Java Studio kind of created the standard for internet apps. And so these authoring tools were the critical piece. And so we said, why don't we create the world's best open source remote learning experience authoring tool? And that's what we did. It's called Curriki Studio. We launched it last summer in sort of a panic because we had started it the year before, but then the pandemic hit, and then kids were shut down. And you know, one of the greatest tragedies we're going to see out of this is the hole in the schooling soul that all these kids have from not being with kids, from looking at people in masks, and we need to find a way to let them catch up. And remote learning experiences are going to continue to be corporations, universities, schools, lifelong learners all want better remote learning experiences. And Studio is free, open source, runs on AWS, runs on OpenShift from Red Hat. It runs on Linode. We just got a major multi-million-dollar donation from Larry Ellison, and Oracle is putting it up and running on their Oracle cloud. And you know, so there's just an enormous take up with universities and corporations with Studio. So I'm busier than I've ever been, plus my advisory work where I advise for stock options, and I'm totally overcommitted on that. And you know, fortunately, the boys are all up and running and doing great things, so I don't have to worry about them. But they call and say, "Dad, slow down." I'm trying to sled.
You need to take a break
downhill.
every once in a while, right?
Yeah, my golf game is not worth taking time off to play anymore.
The remote learning thing is obviously it's big, but I think it's almost like, and I loathe to use this phrase, I hate it, but it's almost like we're seeing what's going to be the new normal. I mean, even if we have classrooms full again, even if we have, you know, all of that happening normally, I think there's still going to be a larger group of people that have gotten used to this the remote experience.
I'd like to kind of blow up the chalkboard model where all 30 of you sit and go at the rate of the slowest kid in the class. You know, that's just not how it should be. And I'd like self-paced, real-time scored, on-demand
for everyone
learning to become. And so school also has you learn two types of things at school. One is you learn skills and tasks and knowledge and wisdom around reading, writing, arithmetic, math, and history, and that sort of stuff. And that all can be learned individually, self-paced, with really great, you know, games of mathematics, games of chemistry, games of physics, games of aerodynamics, sponsored by Elon Musk. You know, all of these things can all be created, funded, and our studio will help that. When you go to school, you should go and do sports, performing arts, visual arts, labs, science projects, debate club, lunch and recess. Those are the things you should be doing at school, not sitting in a room being told, be quiet.
The things that get you to the point where you're actually getting that socialization that you need to go out into the world.
And what we need online are push to talk to a tutor when you need it. And at school, what you need are coaches and you know, people who are coaching and counseling and you know, basically, facilitators of interactions, of civility, of cooperation, collaboration, and conflict, and all the rest of it. We need those. I mean, that's the thing I love about sports. That's a conflict. It's a constrained conflict, and you know, you have an authority. You have a police department called the referee, and all of those are all good things to learn. And so I think the model of sending kids off to daycare and sitting in a room, and it's just we can make it better. And with really, you know, Tiger King addictive gamification of learning. And I saw with my own kids as they started to do self-paced stuff, you'd say at 10:30 at night, all right, kids, step away from the computer. I'm almost done with this. I got one more section to do. And they get excited about it, and they like climbing the leaderboard, and they like building up their own achievement portfolio. And we can do better, and that's what we're trying to get done.
Well, and once you can open source some of that curriculum too, and I hate to say this because I don't want to scare teachers, but once you open source some of that curriculum and you have teachers that are putting stuff online that so in my own children's life, I had a daughter that was absolutely crazy about learning. She loved school, she loved anything, but she got to one teacher, and all it took was that one teacher in that one room to turn that all around, and she hated school. And it took a year to get back from that.
I hear you. In the old days, we had piano players in front of the silent movies, and they would play along with, their score along with the movie, and they would try. Either you got a good piano player, or you got a bad one. You got a drunk one, or you got a sober one. You got one who practiced, or one who had, or you got one who showed up, or one who didn't. And that can change the movie experience drastically. Now, all of a sudden, we learned and got technology to be able to put the musical score right on the film into the theater with speakers, and it's very different. You got the two best piano players move to LA, and everybody else plays piano for fun, but you get perfect musical score. Why don't we do that in the classroom? Not every teacher is one of the top two teachers in the country. Let's get over that, right?
But with what you're talking about, we can put the top two teachers in the country in every classroom.
Exactly. And then you have a push to talk immediately when you get stuck to a teacher who does know and understand and will help you through, and maybe get personalized and get to know you better. And that's a better use. It's not that we don't need teachers. We just don't need lecturers. We need tech support. We need answer center. We need tutoring. We need collaborators, coaches, counselors, facilitators. Those are the kinds of roles that I think adults can help kids with. But learning math and making history exciting and all the rest of it, there's a rare number, and you might want to use more celebrities and other spokesmodels that kids like. So anyhow, I think this pandemic may actually force some fractures in the way we've been teaching, because the whiteboard has been the big innovation, moving off of the blackboard, and I would call that quite cosmetic. So we're driving that change.
And it's really neat. I spent a little while just scrolling through the Curriki webpage, and then some of the YouTube videos that are out there afterwards, because I wasn't really familiar with it before we started talking. So it's neat stuff, man. I'm kind of excited about what you might be able to do.
Well, so we're creating a lot of value, and we're asking everybody to OEM it, rip it off. It's on GitHub. Come take it. It's free. No strings attached. K-12 content creators, universities, students, educators, corporations, governments. We don't care. We want you to capture the value we've created.
You've been obviously leading people for a long time. With all the change that's happening with this pandemic stuff, what's your take on the shift of the workforce mostly to home, more diverse and more, I guess, time split kind of a situation?
So and remember, I don't know if you were in the Sunray era, but we had people have Sunrays at home, and I told them work from home as long as you want. I said, the calendar, we set up the calendar to have 1 week to be meeting week, where we want you to be in town so that you can go meet your bosses, meet your coworkers. The other 3 weeks, work from home, work on the road, do whatever you need to do. And, we're moderately social animals. We don't need to be around. I had a staff meeting. I go with all my directors and VPs, 50 of them in the room. And I said, how many of you have your boss in the same building as you? And, like 5-7% raised their hand. And I said, how many of you are upset about that? Nobody raised their hand, right? They don't want to be led, not managed. People like to have schedule freedom. People like to work till 10:30 at night. People like to get up at 5 a.m. and do email and make phone calls to other geography. They don't want to be stuck in traffic, commuting. And by the way, I just killed me. There was 3% utilization of PCs, 3% utilization of servers, and there's 3% utilization of your office. A lot of programmers need a quiet space to go to, and I'm okay with that. But sales guys shouldn't have an office. They don't need.
But all of that air conditioning, facilities, leasing, it's crazy that I think big companies are paying for all of these campuses.
Well, a lot of people now are working from home and they like it.
Yeah.
And, but, you know, on the other side, I have two boys who just came out of Stanford and are computer scientists, and they're tired of working alone and they want to be with people. Right? When you're young, you
Yeah.
want to learn from the masters and all the rest of it. The older you get, the more comfortable you are with, you know, because you've gotten through the collaboration piece. So I think it's important. And by the way, there's no reason not to let kids come together.
Yeah.
They're not at risk. It's the old guys
Agreed.
me that are at risk. I just got my first shot today of the vaccination stuff.
I don't want to, obviously everybody's experience is different. I'm not trying to say that it's no big deal or whatever, but my wife and I actually both got COVID. For me, it was about 30 days ago. For me, it was really mild. I had a fever and some aches and pains for about 4 days. And I was back in my home gym, on the fifth day. So I wasn't really down for any measurable amount of time, but she had some congestion and cough for about 10 days, but at least for me, it wasn't a big deal. And I'm a little overweight. I'm not in perfect shape. I don't know. So I feel like, me personally, from my experience, if that's even remotely close to what an average person's experience is, that maybe it wasn't worth shutting down all of our facilities, but I don't know. I don't want to make a choice for anyone. So
Right. Well, I wish everybody felt that way. I wish everybody was allowed to make their own choices on this one, and they understood the risks. And I mean, it turns out that we had more of an infodemic
that's I think an excellent way to put it.
And a massive panicdemic on this thing. And I don't know. I've heard horrible stories about people who've lost people through COVID, and I've heard horrible stories about people who have lost kids through suicide and addiction and crime and riots and all kinds.
Because all of their support systems are taken away from them. So
I just, I wonder what the costs are of little kids growing up where the number one thing they learn is facial expressions, and they're not even seeing them. They're going a whole year without even seeing mom or dad's facial expressions or other people's facial. Are they gonna? I hope they catch up. But the brain forms in funny ways at different times, and
exactly.
We won't. I'll probably never see the real implications of all this. Some historian will look back and see what we did to ourselves here.
So I know you kind of wanted to try and wrap it up, so I don't want to keep you too long. I just wondered if you could take like 3 or 4 minutes and looking back on, all the stuff that you've done in your career, all the people that you've, kind of mentored and led. And if you had like 3 or 4 lessons that you really learned about what it takes to actually lead people the right way versus, crushing people, and kind of lay that out for me. Just a few not bullet points, but a few important lessons that you've learned along the way.
Participative, not consensus. Right? Let everybody have a chance to vote, but then you have more votes than anybody else because you're the boss. But if they don't get a chance to vote, if they don't get a chance to voice, then you might get the wrong answer and you won't get them bought in. Second thing I did is I spent my whole career asking everybody I met, if you were CEO, what would you do differently? Again, that's kind of not a decision making, but just a town hall. Every meeting I had with somebody was a town hall, a personal one-on-one town hall. Supplier, customer, partner, employee, shareholder, just always gathering data. Because the boss is the last one to find out, unless you really, honestly, sincerely are seeking out that information. Kick butt, have fun. I would tell everybody we're in it to win it, and we're going to figure out how to win. But we're never going to go near that line of. And I think find any scandal at Sun in the entire name anything that was at all I just never wanted my boys to pick up the newspaper and read something that dad did wrong at work. And so we all tried to live a kick butt, but have fun, but don't cheat kind of environment. And then I guess finally I tried to hire and promote people that had managerial courage. Um, I think that's the toughest trait. Obviously, they have to be high integrity, but having the managerial courage to sit down with somebody and say, hey, I've seen you do good work. That was not good work. What's wrong? How can I help you do good work again? Or, no, we're not going to do that. I know you really want that. Or, no, I'm not going to give you that title because you're not ready. Or, there's a lot of times you just have to have the manager where it would be just easier to give away a title or, let people go start a project even though you couldn't fund it or just to not sit down and say to somebody, hey, this is not the right company for you. I think, why don't you go out and start interviewing now and we'll give you air cover until you can get a new job. And do it without having to say, you're an idiot, you suck, you're fired, that sort of thing. There's just no need to go do that. We always learn that a velvet glove and don't make any enemies on your way up because they'll see you on the way down.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I saw that a lot. I mean, a lot of that even trickled down to, my boss's boss and my boss. They were the first people to say if something went wrong, they'd stand up and say it's my fault, and then they'd talk to their guy off to the side. They didn't throw anybody under the bus. They made sure that any kind of heat that was coming north because of timelines or whatever was on their shoulders. They did a great job. Jim Parkinson, I don't know if you remember him.
Oh, he's a great man.
He's an amazing guy. And he was above my boss, but
we had 235,000 former employees, and you have to do something statistical, but I would say 99% of the people will say that it's the best place they ever worked.
Well, and that's not it's more than that. It almost felt like it was a family, because looking back, anytime that I even am looking at a job change, I still compare every place that I've worked to that, 6 years or so that I was working for Sun.
Hey, listen, I'm no Elon Musk or Larry Ellison or Bill Gates or, the Google boys or Zuck or anyone, but Larry Ellison's a great entrepreneur. We were good. We were good entrepreneurs, but we also did good because we shared. We share our IP, we share our ideas. We groomed a couple hundred CEOs of big companies, Bill Coleman and Carol Bartz and, Satya is running Microsoft now. All these people got a taste of Sun and culture. And I hope we had a good influence on all of those people. And, that's just the way it is. And, I have no regrets at all for anything that we did. We kicked butt, we had fun, and I think we made a difference. And I think everybody's proud of and feels good about the fact that our technology, TCP/IP, NFS, Unix, Linux, all of the Java technologies, the network is the computer, and a lot of the stuff like wearable computing, and we did Google glasses before Google did, and all. There was just so much that came out of Sun Labs, and it's great. That is all out there. Most of it was open sourced, and it's shared and used and leveraged by the world.
So in my basement is actually where all the media that is in the house, all the DVDs and Blu-rays that we get, since about 2009 or so, I built a ZFS pool that has been running continually since then. It's moved, switch hardware. I've switched hard drives and computers.
Your geekiness is showing badly, right?
Well, that's what I do, right, man? But that's been running continuously since ZFS was available. So, and I've been gone from Sun now for 9 years, so it's still there.
ZFS is, I think, at least 15 years old. So.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I suppose on that note, if there's anything else that you'd like to say.
I'd like to say thank you to all of our customers, partners, suppliers, and employees and investors who all made it the best. And everybody check out Kuriki, Curriki. And if you like golf, follow my son. He's on the PGA Tour, Maverick McNealy. He's in the top 35, 40 in the FedEx Cup right now, which is pretty good for a 25-year-old. And if you go to www.birdiesforeducation.com, you can sign up to follow him, and you can pledge X dollars per birdie. So every time you get to birdie, you're going to be on the hook to donate to a very, very great cause, Kuriki. So something to think about. And really, thanks for the time and the audience here to tell a fun story.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Scott. And you have a good night. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.
Thanks, David. Take care, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.